Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravinda Yatapatra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Gitamrita Duhe Namaha Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopalanandanaha Partho Vatsya Sudhir Bhokta Dugdham Gitamritam Mahata Vasudeva Sudam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Thank you for joining us again. Tonight's format will be a little bit different than the usual one. We were unable to secure the blessings and grace of the gods that preside over technology last week. So we couldn't cover all of the content. And what we'll be doing tonight is initially covering the content that we were going to say last week. And then another thing we intended to do last week was a summary of Chapter 12, because many people have been joining anew, and people who were also here before, it was a long time ago when we started, a few months back, so it's good to have another refresher about that. And after we have a refresher of Chapter 12, we will have an introduction, an overview of Chapter 13. So we won't have any review at the beginning. We will start with the last verse of Chapter 12 of the Bhagavad Gita, because that's the one last verse we have yet to finish. So we'll put that on the screen. And the usual format is that I chant the first few syllables, and then you repeat after me, and then we go slowly repeating the verses. So we can put the shloka there on the screen. Yetu dharmamritam idam yathoktam paryupasate sraddhadhana matparama bhaktas te tiva me priyaha. Another thing I've been saying to people is that I'm taking a little bit of liberty in editing the translation, the wording, etc. So this time there's not much to change. The meaning, as you can see on the screen, is, and they who follow this immortal dharma, what we just read out, dharmyamritam, as set forth above, endowed with faith, which is shraddha in Sanskrit, endowed with faith in me as the supreme goal, and devoted, they are exceedingly dear to me. So in Sanskrit, shraddha means faith, whereas in Malayalam, it means more attentiveness, awareness, focus on the moment, and so on. That's how Amma typically uses it. She also has a very good explanation for associating the two. Even though Malayalam has one meaning and Sanskrit has another meaning, she says full awareness is actually faith. Especially when the Guru is talking, we should have that full awareness, and that shows our faith in the Guru's teachings. So here we're translating it as faith because it's in Sanskrit. And I have one little bit of commentary from the Saint Jnanadev. He says, O Partha, O Arjuna, such ones are the real devotees and yogins in this world, and it is these for whom I feel an eternal longing. Wow. So whoever follows this teaching will also be dear to God, to the Guru, to Amma. Not just the supreme devotee, not just the parabhakta, but the parabhakta in training also. And I think we all know that we are not supreme devotees. We have a lot of shortcomings. But we could possibly include ourselves in that category of supreme devotee in training. If so, that means that we are also very dear to Amma, like Krishna says. Now let's look at each of the concepts that show up in this verse. Dharmyamritam is a beautiful concept because it's translated here as this immortal dharma. But for us, the dharma of Amritam, it's such a key concept for us. We want to do what Amma is saying as our dharma. If there's an Amrita dharma, we want to follow it because that's part of our love for Amma. It's such a beautiful name for a set of values, and it makes those values feel very close to our hearts. So we feel like we want to practice it in order to be Amma's darling child. And there's also another verse that refers to children of Amrita in one of the Upanishads. It's Amritasya putra shranvantu. It means, O children of immortality, listen. So this is exactly what we're doing here. We're listening to Krishna's words, but we know that they are the same as Amma's words. And it's not just listening, but it's when we practice these virtues sincerely, then we are exceedingly dear to Amma, and the ultimate outcome is actually Amritam, immortality. Because Krishna is going to explain that to us more as we go on. But these values are part of the process of evolution towards moksha. So the ultimate outcome is indeed immortality. And then he says, set forth above. Oh, what is he referring to? It's clear from Shankaracharya's commentary that he means from verses 13 to 19 of this chapter 12. Then what kind of attitude should we have as we diligently follow this dharma? He even specifies that when they have full faith in him or in God, in our Guru. What kind of faith? What does that mean? Well, we have to have faith in the efficacy of these values, because without that faith, somewhere along the way, we will start to lose our interest. We will start to drop those values, and we'll also try to find shortcuts and whatnot, because that conviction is necessary whenever we have to follow spiritual values, because those spiritual values are not engineered for material prosperity. They are engineered, or they are selected for our spiritual growth. And somewhere along the line, when our mind gets tired, it's going to say, I want the fast food version, which is typically not what spirituality requires. And tests and difficulties will come, so we need the strength of faith that enables us to withstand all these challenges. You may have read in Amma's books how she says that when somebody is thinking of renouncing the world, or when feelings of detachment, non-attachment rise up in their mind, then different tests will arise, and to test that person's commitment and conviction. So it was when I was still living in Japan and working in Japan that I first read that in one of Amma's books, Awakened Children, one of the early volumes. And I thought, oh wow, yeah, I'm sure that these tests will be coming. I have to be very careful, because I was just starting to get that feeling like I wanted to renounce the world and spend the rest of my life with Amma. And so it was about 6 months before I was leaving the country. I was scheduled to leave the country to join the ashram. Amma had given me, permission, and I was just like flying because of that. And I was working for a regional government office, and we had a sister city arrangement, a new thing. And so we all went there, a lot of the administration members, and I was invited also. And we went there, and we had a gathering of the people in this sister city of ours, and different people had to give a talk, and they made me give a talk also in Japanese. And so I gave a talk, and afterwards, in a private moment, the mayor of that town came up to me, and he says, how much longer are you working for those guys? And I said, well, actually, I'm leaving Japan in about 6 months. And he says, why? I'll give you a job. And I was like, I don't want a job. And then he says, what are they paying you? And I said, well, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to stay. He says, whatever it is, I'll pay you double. And I said, double? Double? Wait a second. No, I don't want a job. I want to go to India. So there was this moment where I was thinking to myself, even though I had already decided that I wanted to go to India, that temptation showed that I still had this attachment to money. And, and just the praise of someone saying that they want to hire you like that, it makes your ego puff up. And for a few seconds, or I don't know how long it was, I actually entertained that thought for a moment, and then I said, no. And even more humorously, the day before I was leaving for India, I had built up a very brief relationship with the governor of that prefecture, and we did a beach cleanup, and then we got to meet him afterwards, and then we spoke once after that also. So I thought I would say farewell to him before I left. So I went to his office. He agreed to meet me, and I said, I'm leaving for India tomorrow. He says, what are you going to do in India? I said, well, I'm going to be a volunteer. And he said, when are you coming back? And I said, well, I don't know, maybe never. And then he said, well, if you come back, I'll give you a job. And I was like, the governor's going to give me a job? Wow. No. She's trying to trick me again. So again, I fell for it twice. But fortunately, by that time, I already had a ticket, and there was no turning around like that. So these little tests of our faith are very, they don't come just, when we're in an easy way. They're actual tests. Even when you think you don't want something, Amma will find a way to test our faith. So we have to be very vigilant. And one of the most beautiful confirmations that we are on the right track is, I would say, the end of Devi Bhava. So let's say you're a coordinator or a Sevite in a country or in a city where Amma comes, and the whole program, you're really busy and you're so tired, you didn't sleep much, maybe you haven't eaten much, and it just, you're pushed to the maximum. And along the way, people will, sometimes they argue with each other, just because they're tired or whatever. And even though we're there for the sake of spirituality, sometimes we do things that aren't particular spiritually. They're not very spiritual things. We say nasty things, perhaps, whatever it is. And but then at the end of Devi Bhava, when you see Amma standing on that stage, with that inexplicably full and content and satisfied, what is it on her face? It's just complete peace and fullness on her face. She says she's seeing us as divine beings, and we can't see that in ourselves, but she can see it, and then we see that fullness reflected off of her face. And then it is just such an amazing thing. You must have seen the videos where there are videos of people watching Amma at the very end of Devi Bhava with so much devotion and tears on their face. That is when we confirm that, yes, this is the right path for me. I don't want anything else. This is what I am here for. Not just in the hall, but this birth. This is what I'm here for. So there are negative tests, and then there are positive confirmations that we are all on the right path. So the next part of the verse is, as the supreme goal. This is important, I feel, because basically God or Guru, Amma, has to be our ultimate goal. Because there's so many other goals in life that we are pursuing consciously and unconsciously. We have to make sure that we hold Amma or the Guru, God, whatever it is for you, as the highest. So we don't compromise our spirituality for the sake of something else. So the Guru is a symbol of everything that matters to us in life. And then the feet are the symbol of the Guru. So if you ever wondered why we have pictures of the feet sometimes, that's it. It's the most compact symbol of our purpose in life, our goal in life. So we have to consider that the ultimate destination. And then he says, such devotees are exceedingly dear to me. Now, who wouldn't want to be exceedingly dear to Amma? What if she said, this is all you have to do, and you'll be exceedingly dear to me? It'd be like, yep, sign me up. And then you look at the list and you say, can I cross off a few of these here? It's like Swami Pranavamritananda once made a promise to Amma that he was not going to drink chai anymore. And he put his hand on her head. He said, Amma, I will never drink chai again. And then Amma didn't say anything. And then a few days later, he felt like drinking chai. He felt really a powerful desire. So he put his hand on top of Amma's head and he says, I'm taking back my promise, and so I can go have a cup of tea. Like that. So, we may not be able to fulfill all those conditions. And in fact, I have compiled the conditions that he gave in this chapter and a few from earlier chapters. So we're going to have a file that has a number of qualities that Krishna has either told us that we need to cultivate, or he uses them in praise of the supreme devotee, which gives us a goal to aspire towards. So that file will be available to everyone in some way. Maybe we'll try to put it in the chat of this course or today's class, or it could be in the description later. Just nose around, you'll find it. Otherwise, we'll give it to everybody next week. So previously, in the previous verses from 13 to 19, he was describing one who has perfected all these virtues. Now he is including people like us, the one who's on the road to liberation, not the one who has realized it. But even those who are on the road to realization or moksha, they're also dear to God. But we have to keep in mind that just having these virtues is not a guarantee of liberation, or it's not a proof that somebody is liberated. These qualities make us fit for moksha. Just fit for moksha, they don't give moksha. For moksha, we need self-knowledge. because moksha means liberation from our spiritual ignorance. And as we know, knowledge is the only thing that can remove ignorance, just like light is the only thing that can remove darkness. So that knowledge needs to come. Until then, we're still stuck in Maya, unfortunately. We may be a noble person, but it doesn't mean that we are spiritually wise. So what we have to do is follow the virtues first, deepen our spiritual understanding also, and then we have to assimilate that. That process takes a long time. I think we've all understood that. We may quote Amma's teachings, but really struggle to practice. That's the problem. So that assimilation period is very, it can be very long. But ultimately, with Amma's grace, we will be liberated, so long as we assimilate all those teachings. That's the key thing. That's the nididhyasana part of the process. And this is the essence of this section of the Gita. We go through these phases, and finally, through the Guru's grace, I would say, we can attain liberation. So this is the conclusion of the 12th chapter. And if you joined us in between, maybe a few weeks ago, or you just want a review, we're going to have a summary now of chapter 12, touching on the themes of the second section of the Gita as well. So 12th chapter is the last chapter of the second section of the Bhagavad Gita. We have 18 chapters, 6 chapters in the first, 6 in the second, and 6 in the third section of the Bhagavad Gita. So from 7 to 12 was the middle part of the Bhagavad Gita. So what is the main teaching in this section? As you might expect, it's bhakti. It's devotion. Because the 12th chapter is called Bhakti Yoga, and it's the culmination of this whole section. Another word that is used here is upasana. Upasana kind of technically means like worship, but bhakti also, it's the same thing in terms of the context here. We may use those words a little interchangeably. They have some ramifications that are different, but here it doesn't matter so much. So since we're talking about bhakti, just even in the summary, it's a good opportunity for us to ask ourselves, do I have real bhakti? We may call ourselves devotees. I'm a devotee of Amma. Oh yes, I'm following bhakti yoga in Amma's way. But what qualities do we need to cultivate in order to acquire real bhakti? What is real bhakti? We may have never asked ourselves these questions. So during this section, Krishna has been preparing Arjuna, and us too, indirectly, for bhakti by explaining the nature of God. And there were two main points. He said God, in essence, he said God is not only the source of the universe, God is the very universe itself and beyond. That beyond part came earlier in the second section. So the climax of all these ideas is that it is important for us to see this whole world, this whole universe, as God's universal form and worship that. It's called Vishwarupa Upasana, or Virararupa Upasana, or Virararupa Bhakti. It boils down to worshiping the universal form, this whole world as God's form, or we can say Amma's form, to make it closer to our heart. And in that process of learning how to worship this universal form, Krishna gave us 5 levels, you could say, or 5 types of bhakti. And he started his explanation from the highest level. And then he went down to the simplest level. But we have to, eventually, all of us are going to have to learn how to practice these and appreciate them. Otherwise, we will never reach moksha. We may say, I like this kind of bhakti, but Krishna says, and Amma also talks about the different levels of bhakti, and she ultimately we know from her teachings that we have to embrace all of these. We cannot just choose one. They're kind of a progression, but when we look at the lives of great sages of yore, we know that we never really fully relinquish any one of those steps, because we may choose to adore God in a variety of ways. Even after God realization, saints do that, not because they need it, but because they want to show normal human beings like us these different levels of devotion, and how each one of them has its own sweetness and a peace that it gives us. But it is considered a progression, so for sure we will take it in that way. At the beginning of Chapter 12, while answering Arjuna's question, Krishna said that worshipping God with form is superior for Arjuna. And Arjuna is basically a representative, a symbol of your average person. And unless you think you're the supreme devotee, you can probably put yourself in the same category as Arjuna. All of us fit in that category most of the time. So anybody who is not ready to worship God in the formless aspect is going to have to choose some form or another, right? One who has the depth of understanding and experience can worship the formless, but the rest of us should stick with saguna bhakti, or devotee that involves form and characteristics. So he starts with the subtlest level of devotion, though. And that is called Akshara Upasana, which means basically worship of Brahman. Brahman is the formless absolute. So you sit down and then Amma says, okay, now meditate on the formless absolute. How am I going to do that, right? Unless you know what he's talking about, unless you have that understanding and a very purified mind and a very concentrated mind, it's not going to happen. But he starts with that just to show this is the ultimate destination. And this kind of meditation is none other than jnana yoga. It is a very advanced form of meditation. And due to its subtlety, due to the fact that the object, the quote-unquote object of worship is our own self, dedicated practice of this kind of devotion is the only one that can lead us directly to liberation, because it is your true self. When you meditate on Brahman, you're meditating on the Atman. It's the one and the same thing, just looking from different standpoints. And if you're not really meditating on it, if it's your own self, you're trying to establish yourself in your true being. That's what it really is. But from our standpoint, we think we have to meditate on something. In this case, there's no object. So we're trying to establish ourselves in our true being, and unfortunately, we're not in touch with that true being so well. So it makes it very difficult for us to practice that kind of meditation or that kind of devotion. So we will all have to embrace that kind of devotion at one time or another, and until then, there are other ways, fortunately, for those who find it difficult. In verses 6 to 8, Krishna talks about that worship of the universal form, Vishwarupa Upasana. It means worshipping the entire universe as none other than Amma's body. Though it is almost infinite, the universal form is at least some kind of form, which makes it easier for us beginners to concentrate. I'm just going to say we're all beginners, because you'll find out when we get down to the bottom of the list of meditation techniques. But even this Vishwarupa, the universal form type of devotion, has a form. So it's dualistic. It has duality. It's not pure Vedanta. It's a compensation for our immaturity. So it cannot give liberation directly. It's very advanced as well, but doesn't give liberation directly because there's still duality. And we should remember that even this universal form that we would be meditating on is only what is called the apara prakriti. This is from, I think, chapter 7. Apara prakriti means the lower nature of God, because it's visible, it changes. You know, I remember looking at some news piece, the astronomers, the scientific field is always finding new things out there. They can't make up their mind what's going on in space. It's changing all the time. No matter how vast it may be, it is not permanent. That's the point. But that which is real remains the same in the past, present, and future. This is the definition of reality in Vedanta, Advaita. So the changing universe does not qualify. Only the what is called the para prakriti, the supreme or the higher nature of God, qualifies as real, eternal. But that is unmanifest, and that is what exists even between the creations of the universe. They say that one day of Brahman and one night of Brahman. So Brahmaji, one day of Brahmaji and one night of Brahmaji. Like the astronomers are trying to figure out how old the universe is and how many years we have left. Whatever the actual answer is, that whole existence of the universe is one day of Brahmaji, the creator. And then he goes to sleep and it lasts for the same amount of time. What it means is that there's no creation at that time. But the para prakriti still exists. So when we talk about Vishwarupa, the worship of this visible universe, that's not the whole enchilada, so to speak. It's not all of God, because the unmanifest part is what really lasts forever. But for us, that means we have to meditate on Brahman. So that's the highest state. We take it down one, and then we say, okay, I'm going to try to worship this, nature, this world, as best as I can. So in verse 9, Krishna talked about another technique. He gave, he figured that probably Arjuna and most of us would not be able to meditate on the whole universe, So it amounts to the path of constant practice. And the name given is Abhyasa Yoga, which simply means the yoga of constant practice. So the way Amma has instructed her disciples from the earliest time is by focusing on a photo. Typically it would be a photo of Amma, maybe in Krishna Bhava or Devi Bhava or Kali Bhava. And they would meditate on her form for 10 minutes, and then they would close their eyes and try to visualize that same form in their mind's eye, within. That's what Amma taught them to do. So if she says, if you get distracted, then open your eyes, look at the photo again, close your eyes, and try to get the form to come back again. So no matter how many times your mind wanders, you bring it back over and over and again. That's what Krishna said in chapter 6 also, in Dhyana Yoga, the yoga of meditation. So that's what it is. The constant practice is bringing the wayward mind back to the object of meditation over and over again. So this is even more dualistic because it requires focusing on a finite form, not the whole universe, right? Instead of the whole universe, we have one picture of Amma, Krishna, Jesus, Buddha, whatever it is. Or Amma says, if you don't want a form, you can just imagine a flame. Something is there, some kind of form is there, and it's finite. So we've come down another level, right? Because let's face it, we all struggle. We would struggle to see the whole universe as Amma. If we see the whole universe as Amma, we should like everything in the universe equally. And are we doing that? I remember somebody sent me a funny video at the beginning of lockdown. Many of you may have seen it. But a fellow was being told by some official. The official was saying to him, you have two choices. You will be in lockdown with your wife and children for 2 months. That's option A. And option B is, and before he even started, the guy says, B. Anything but being locked indoors with his family for 2 months, right? So that shows that we cannot see the world as God, really. We have preferences. Things annoy us, right? We have likes and dislikes. So at least Amma's form, we can feel so much love towards that. So we can try to do that. But sometimes even that doesn't go very well. So in chapter 10, Krishna refers to a practice that is basically karma yoga, but the more difficult side of karma yoga. That means offering all our actions to God. It's called Ishvara Arpana Buddhi, the attitude of offering everything to God. In our case, we would say I'm offering it to Amma. But it is harder because more often than not, our actions are motivated by thoughts of our own comfort, convenience, and attachments. Only a very small portion of our actions would be intentionally dedicated to Amma, because mostly we're looking for something that we need. I need some food. Do I have enough toothpaste in the morning? What about in Texas they had this freezing cold. So there's no hot water. How did the people? They probably couldn't take baths at that time. How can you think of offering everything to Amma? Your survival, and also everything else. You're trying to get on the freeway, which road has less traffic. I mean, at times like that, how are we going to offer all these things to Amma? Because our mind is preoccupied with our convenience. It's just the reality of our day-to-day life. It'd be nice if it weren't, and we eventually will get beyond that. But the reality, I think, is that we're mostly concerned about our own convenience. So until we reduce our self-centered actions or our self-centeredness, the majority of our activities don't really qualify for that concept, offering to Amma. Because you have to do it consciously. You can't say, after the fact, that was for Amma. It has to be while we're doing it. It should be like a puja, everything we're doing. Knowing that, Krishna gave one last option, which is pretty much anybody can practice if they have the mind to do so. And it's the final method, so it's the last chance. That came in verse 11. Even if we do all of our actions for ourselves, if we can just accept the outcome of those actions as Amma's prasad, God's will, that is enough. This is called prasada buddhi. Just means the attitude that everything that comes to us in life is God's prasad. So, since it can be practiced by anybody, perhaps that is why Krishna praises that approach in the next verse of 12. Anybody can practice it. Arjuna can practice it. The majority of people in the world can practice it if they feel like it. They just have to accept what comes to them in life. So that is the progression, starting from the more difficult to the easier. But I'll do it the other way around, starting from the easiest, using the Sanskrit names. The easiest one is called prasada buddhi. The next one is called Ishvara Arpana Buddhi. Then there's Abhyasa Yoga. Fourth one is Vishwarupa Upasana. And the final one is Akshara Upasana, worshipping Brahman. And now I have to worship the body for a moment. We have to invoke the grace of the vocal cords. Then from verses 13 to 19, Krishna praised the supreme devotee, perhaps to encourage Arjuna and all of us to spare no effort in attaining that state. When you see that list, for the first time for sure, but even if you're seeing it having already heard all the explanations, it's a rather daunting task to embrace all of those qualities in our life. So as a consolation, perhaps, Krishna concludes the chapter with a verse that glorifies those who sincerely strive to follow that path. That was the verse we heard just a moment ago. So having explained devotion in great detail, all the way up to Vishwarupa, Upasana, worship of the universal form, Krishna has prepared all of us to dive deeper into that highest, most subtlest type of devotion, which was devotion to Brahman, Akshara Upasana. Worship of the formless absolute. It is really a tantalizing prospect, I know, but without understanding how it works, we will never succeed at that process. Knowing that, Lord Krishna compassionately will spend the next 6 chapters educating us and guiding us through that learning process we need in order to do Akshara Upasana. And we can consider that it is Amma speaking through Krishna, none other than Amma speaking through Krishna, when we hear those verses in the next section of the Gita. We're going to have that overview of chapter 13 in a moment, but first let us chant the closing prayers from the 12th chapter, and again it'll be call and response. This signifies the conclusion of chapter 12, and from there we will move on to chapter 13. Om Tat Sat Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Bhakti Yogo Nama Dvadashodhyayaha. Thus ends the 12th chapter, named Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion of the Upanishad of the Bhagavad Gita, the scripture of yoga, dealing with the science of the absolute in the form of the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna. So with this, we have, hopefully we appeal to Lord Krishna to allow us to move into chapter 13. So let us move on to the introduction of chapter 13. We have covered the first 2 sections of the Gita, which is 489 verses actually. That's 70% of the Bhagavad Gita. And the last section of chapter 13 through 18 consists of another 211 verses. If we go at the same rate that we've been doing so far, not counting COVID, we might finish the Gita in just another 3 years. That's all. Maybe 2.5. But don't worry, this is not a speed reading course. We want to assimilate it, we want to absorb it, right? You don't do so by speed reading. So we're going to enter a new section, and let us first review the predominant topics discussed, not only in this section, but in the previous 2 sections, because only then will we understand the continuity in the Bhagavad Gita. Each section covers 3 topics. The main teaching, or you could say the philosophical focus, and then the other second theme is the application of that focus, and the third theme is a key factor to keep in mind while applying those teachings. So the 3 topics in the first 6 chapters are the main teaching on Jiva Swarupam. Jiva Swarupa means the essence of the individual. Jiva is like the individual. Jivatma is the individual soul. Jiva is the individual, like our individuality, who we think we are. So the essence of that, what is that? That is the main teaching. And the application of that teaching is going to be through karma yoga. So that was touched on in that section as well. And there was something that was really important for the application of that teaching, and that was self-effort as part of karma yoga. So these 3 themes came up. And self-effort means that we cannot use fatalism as an escape route. Oh no, my life, I'm just like this, I can't do it. I'm not going to ever, be able to get rid of my vasanas. I'm done for, that kind of thing. Or some people say, oh, I'll come when Amma calls me. You know, when the ashram calls me, I'll come. Well, do we say that to ourselves when we want to have dinner? Or we want to see a movie or go shopping? Do we say, let the shopping mall call me, then I'll go? No, all the things that we like and we're interested in, nobody has to tell us to do them. We do them on our own because we have desires regarding those. What this shows is that we don't have any interest we don't have any desires for spirituality. If we say, oh, let the ashram call me, I'll see Amma when she calls me, like that. So we shouldn't think like that, and Krishna basically puts that confusion to rest in chapter 6, verse 5. One must raise oneself by his own self. Let him not debase himself. The point is that we have to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. Nobody else can do it for us. Don't wait for someone to come along and do it to you or tell you to do it. Now we've heard these teachings, we have to apply them. That's the test of our spirituality and of what we're interested in life. The 3 topics in the second 6 chapters were the main teaching on Ishvara Swarupam. Before we had the essence of the individual, of the Jiva. Now we have the essence of God, Ishvara. Wow. Is that what I just studied? We might not have really understood that. We'll talk about that, just to make sure. That's why we're going over it, to make sure that we understood it. And the way we apply that teaching was through Bhakti Yoga, or Upasana. That's why 12th chapter is the culmination of that teaching. Now, previously it was self-effort. What is it here? What would be the opposite of that? God's grace. We need God's grace. Self-effort is not enough. We have to pray. And we have to receive the outcome of all of our effort as God's prasad. Because that way, only that way will we understand that our effort is not everything. There's like Amma says, there's a multitude of factors that affect the outcome of our actions. So if we want our actions to be perfect and complete, and if we want to achieve the purposes for which we do all these things, what we need above all else is God's grace. So we can neither forsake self-effort nor God's grace. That's kind of a response to one of the questions that was out there. We need both. And our effort conditions God's grace. That's what Amma has said for many, many years. We have to make effort, and then according to that, we get God's grace. And also there's karma as a big factor. So some people have to make more effort to overcome their karma. And at particular times, the same person may need to make additional effort to achieve the same goal that he or she achieved easily before. So all these things require a lot of effort and praying for grace. Now, this concept of essence, we didn't really go into that yet today. What does that mean when we say the essence of the individual, the essence of God? It means that we're looking at it from 2 different angles. One is the essence of the Jiva, or God, with form and attributes, and then without form and attributes. So let's look at something familiar, the individual. With form, what does that mean? It means the individual that I know. This body, my personality, my intellect, my convictions, my thought processes, my likes and dislikes, all these kind of things are the me that I know. That means the me that has a form and attributes. The other way to look at the individual is how Amma sees all of us. She doesn't identify our body with us, mind, intellect. She knows all these things. Sometimes she will say, this person has this tendency, etc. Just jokingly. So she knows what our tendencies are, but that's not what she sees as me, as the I. She just sees, in truth, in reality, what she sees in us is the self-luminous Atman, Satchidananda. So Krishna says something that we should keep in mind, which is the definition of our true being, of our essence. In chapter 2, verse 20. The Atma is neither born, nor does it die. Coming into being and ceasing to be do not take place in it. Unborn, eternal, constant, and ancient, it is not killed when the body is slain. Wow. You know, this is actually something that we can see has taken place in Amma's life. There's a beautiful story from her biography. It's really easy to talk about things like this. I mean, I can talk about it, but you know, if someone were to come and say, so you believe that you're not going to die, well then let me kill you. You know, what would I do? I don't think I would be as cool and collected as I am now. You know, we can talk about it, especially when it's in regards to another person, but only a self-realized being fully understands the truth of it, not only intellectually, but also experientially. That's why I want to share with you an incident that took place in Amma's life a long time ago, and how she responded to an extreme test of that knowledge, spiritual knowledge. Some of you may remember that Amma had an older brother named Subhagan, and one day he and a few of their family cousins called Amma to a relative's house under a false pretext. They were always harassing her. They felt that she was harassing the family because of all the things she was doing. And when she arrived, they immediately locked her into a room. And one of her cousins began threatening her. And he pulled out a huge knife, which he had hidden. And he was, threatening her with it. Then Amma's elder brother came in and said, "This behavior of yours has gone too far." What behavior? Giving darshan. That's all she's doing is giving darshan. But like I said, I think last week, this is considered, it was considered, not okay by the social mores of the day, because she's a young woman hugging everybody, even if they're the lowest of the low in society, or an unmarried man. She saw them all as her children, so she hugged them. But these people couldn't tolerate it. And he said, you're going to spoil the family name. And since you cannot stop mixing freely with all sorts of people, and you cannot stop your singing and dancing, it's better you die. He was enraged when he heard Amma laugh and retort, "I'm not at all afraid of death. The body must meet its end sooner or later, but it is impossible for you to kill the self. But now that you are determined to put an end to my physical existence, I have one last wish. Just let me meditate for a while, then you can kill me while I'm meditating." How many of us could say that? I'm just going to meditate. And even if you sat down, how can you meditate when someone's got a big knife? Then one of them exclaimed, "Who are you to command us? Are we here to kill you or not kill you according to your wish?" Amma smiled and responded, "It seems that nobody but God can put an end to my life." And then they had had enough. The cousin that had brandished the knife, he jumped forward and pressed the knife against Amma's chest, as if to stab her. But he couldn't. He couldn't make another move. And he was immediately stricken with a sharp pain in his chest, the same place where he had touched Amma's chest. And he fell on the floor in agony. So this cousin who had raised the knife against Amma, he was taken to the hospital. Then Amma visited him in the hospital and lovingly consoled him and fed him with her own hands. He was so repentant towards her after, that incident and her coming compassionately consoling him. He burst into tears for her compassion and forgiveness. Ultimately, they did everything they could to save him, but he finally died. Maybe it's just a law of karma. But this is an example of someone who has that actual knowledge of the self. That is the reality. So we can look at the individual from two ways. Either it is finite, that's what we know, or infinite, that's the one that Amma knows. Amma even sees us that way though. One day during bhajans, she said that she sees all of her children as God, pure consciousness, millions of suns blazing. She says she sees us as embodiments of divine effulgence. For some reason, especially during bhajans. So it means she's seeing us without any attributes. She's seeing us as the Atman. So what about in the case of God? How do we adopt these two standpoints, two methods of looking at God in the same way as we looked at the individual, with attributes and without? That means we're looking at God from a dualistic standpoint, and we also have to look from a non-dualistic standpoint. What does that present us with? The dualistic God, or Ishvara, is basically what we would call the creator. Because if there's a creator, there's a creation, and there's this concept that they're separate. Of course, Amma tells us that they are not, but just the word creator, someone who's the cause of something else, makes us feel there's a duality. And unfortunately, that's about all we can process at this time. But there is a nice analogy given in India's scriptures that helps us understand what is really meant by that. They give an example of a spider, and they say that there's really only one thing. In reality, there's only God, right? So God is both the intelligent source, the one who actually creates, and also he's the material cause as well. Everything in this world is also God, like a spider. So the spider, there's only a spider, there's nothing else. And then the web comes into existence. How did that happen? Is that a separate thing? No. Everything came from the spider also. So we could say it is the spider only. There's only the spider is there before and after. It's a simple analogy. But from the standpoint of intelligent cause, we say God created the world. And from the standpoint of the material cause, we say God evolved into this world. And that concept is expressed in the Purusha Suktam, which comes in the Rig Veda. In these verses, I'll just read the English for you. The Purusha, with the 3/4 of its energy, ascended above. His 1/4 of material energy becomes this creation again and again. Then he pervades this universe, comprising a variety of sentient and insentient objects. Sentient beings and insentient objects. So passages like this would really make us want to worship this whole world, right? We reach the conclusion that there is no world other than God, if this is how it came into being. And from that understanding arises the concept of worshiping this whole universal form as divine. But that's still dualistic, right? Like I said, the universe, no matter how vast it is, it's still a form, and it's still duality, because it's finite. They say it's infinite, but anything that has come into existence can never be infinite. It will eventually go away. So what about the non-dualistic version of God? Well, if we forget about the creation, if we forget about all these concepts that we have attributed to God, that's what we have. We have the non-dualistic version of God. All the characteristics, all the names, all the forms that we attribute to God. We have all these appellations, like He's the creator, He is all-pervasive, or God is all-pervasive, God is all-knowing, and so on. But what about the time when the creation is gone? Like we said, the night of Brahman. There's no creation, it's just pure being. Who is there to create what? There's nobody there to create anything. There's no second thing. And there's nothing to know. Who is going to know it? And what is that second thing to be pervaded by this existence? There's nothing. So ultimately we find that God is none other than the pure consciousness, Satchidananda, the exact same way Amma views us. So in this way, the key teaching in section 2 of the Gita is on that formless aspect of God. That God, when you remove all these concepts that we project on God, you're left with pure consciousness, Satchidananda only. Once during a TV interview, the interview asked Amma quite innocuously, like you might ask anybody, he said, "So, tell me about yourself. Who are you?" And just imagine you're the interviewer, right? And Amma replied, "People call this body Mata Amritanandamayi or Amma, but the real Amma is all-pervasive, existing everywhere." Then you can just imagine the interviewer. That's wonderful. So happy for you. Thank you. But it's just like right over their head. They wouldn't have gotten it at all. But the fact that she just spoke it point blank, that was a real shock to everybody. Normally she never says anything like that. But it shows that she knows who she really is. So up to the second section of the Gita, we have the assessment of the essence of the individual and God. And we understand that they're very similar, aren't they? So with this background, let us look at the themes for the final 6 chapters of the Gita, what we're entering in now. The 3 topics in the 3rd section are the main teaching on Jiva, Ishvara, Aikyam, which means the unity of the individual and God. This is the only conclusion one can reach after hearing this much. The application of that teaching is through Jnana Yoga, because if we're one with God and we don't know that, if we're not experiencing that, we have a problem, for sure. But it's not a problem, of doing, or a problem of not doing, or a problem of, trying to change our mind, or change our feelings, or change our energy. It is purely knowledge. That's the only problem we have. It's a knowledge-based problem. We need to realize that, in truth, we are one with God. So that's why the only option is to focus on spiritual wisdom, understanding, and that's why we say Jnana Yoga. But what is that important factor, that 3rd factor that he's going to emphasize in this 3rd section of the Gita, and that is divine virtues. Divine virtues are going to help us tremendously in the process of Jnana Yoga, or deepening our understanding. And in this Gita, we're going to find more teachings that sound like the Upanishads. We chanted that a moment ago. We called the Gita, it's actually an Upanishad. It's given that status because the teachings are no less great than the Upanishads. And this section of the Gita has a lot of those kind of teachings, and so we'll be getting deeper and deeper into it. It'll take a lot of concentration and understanding on our part. And to put it in 12th chapter terminology, we would say that there's going to be more about Akshara Upasana and Parabhakti. There's going to be more about worship of Brahman and the supreme devotion. But why all this focus on virtues, though? Why is that important? So without virtuous mental qualities, Jnana Yoga can easily be exploited to rationalize a life of decadence. People say, oh, it's all Brahman, I'm God, you're God, everything's God, so there's nothing, we don't have to do anything, we just be. That would work if we didn't have a mind full of self-centered desires. If we didn't have really strong likes and dislikes, that would be fine. The problem is that we're saturated, the mind is saturated with them too much, so that you cannot just flippantly say it like that. That's why Lord Krishna is going to give us a long list, extensive lists of qualities and virtues and the virtues that we need to cultivate in chapter 13 and 16. So he's also going to give us some qualities that we have to avoid. The very title of chapter 16 is the Yoga of Divine and Demonic Qualities. It's one that we're going to really need to look at very clearly. And we already have a lengthy list of virtues to be cultivated from chapter 12. So we may get overwhelmed, but once you have that list in hand, I'll complete it when we finish 13 and 16. Each time I'll add those qualities into to a table of some sort. We can just pick one per day. Okay, let me try to practice this one today, or at least for the next hour. Something. It's a way of teaching ourselves, reminding ourselves that these are qualities we need to work on. And from chapter 13, verse 8, Krishna will start specifically pointing out what we should practice. There'll be some more specifics that we can focus on, make it a little more practical. And in this chapter, this 13th chapter, Krishna actually refers to values or these virtues as knowledge. It's a pretty important word that he's using there. Normally he doesn't use it. He never uses it casually, but he uses it here because these are essential to us in acquiring knowledge, in acquiring jnana. Without values, the pursuit of spiritual wisdom just becomes an academic, quest of some sort. There are some people who can talk about all these things, and they will correct you if you say the wrong thing or whatever, but they may not be able to practice it, because if for lack of the virtues, the practical part is impossible. And then when we get to chapter 16, we're going to hear all about divine and demonic characteristics. And really, actually, a lot of the demonic characteristics, we're not free from all of them. We all have some of those qualities to some degree, and some of the divine qualities as well. So that's why it's called Daivasura Sampat, the qualities that make a person divine or demonic. Sadly, we're a mixture of both, but that's okay, because Amma knows that, and she's guiding us with full knowledge of that. In chapter 17, also values are emphasized as sattvic gunas. Sattvic, I hope everybody remembers, sattva means that pure energy that we have when we're feeling, peaceful or quiet to us, like an inner quietude. Our emotions are not disturbed, our mind is quiet, and we have neither repulsion or attraction to anything. We're just feeling balanced, equipoised. That is sattvic feeling, or sattvic quality in the mind. And then Krishna guides Arjuna to avoid Rajyasik and Tamasik tendencies. We've talked about these a lot. Rajyasik is just a very active, or we could even say hyperactive energy, unbalanced for sure. It's unbalanced towards activity. And then tamas is unbalanced towards inactivity, lethargy, darkness, when our mind is very kind of cloudy, then that's an example of tamas. And when the mind is very agitated and restless, that is the sign of rajas. So Krishna uses different terms. He may say knowledge, jnanam, he may say divine sampat, divine wealth, or he may say sattvic qualities. Whatever it is, they all mean the same thing, values and virtues, which are going to be emphasized throughout this whole section of the Gita, the final section of the Gita. And most importantly, we should address that main teaching of this section, which we said was Jiva Ishvara Aikyam, the unity of the individual and God. As in the previous two sections, we consider the same two viewpoints on the matter, with attributes and without attributes. And these attributes in Sanskrit, they're called upadis. And then when you say with characteristics or attributes, it becomes sopadhika. Sopadhika. Okay, just a little Sanskrit word. From the sopadhika angle, we are definitely not the same as God, right? Because my form is only this big, and I have very limited ability to do anything, to perceive things, to know things, to act. I'm very limited. So there's no way I can say I'm one with God, or I have union with God on the physical level, on the sopadhika angle with my body, mind, etc. And especially because you look at God, because God is this whole universe. We just heard that in chapter 12. And beyond, how can I say that I'm one with the universe? It's not it's just not a subject to even talk about. But like we said earlier, when we strip all the qualities, all the so-called me, and this is what we do in some of the meditations, is we remove these concepts one by one. You witness your breath, you witness the energy carried by the breath, you witness your body, you witness your thoughts, you witness your intellect judging things. And when as you witness each one of these things, you're distancing yourself from it and recognizing that it is not the real you. It's not an essential component of your being. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to witness it, right? So these kind of exercises help us to de-identify with all of these upadis, all of these attributes, and help us identify more with just the pure consciousness. That is the nirupadika standpoint. Nirupadika means looking at it from the standpoint of no attributes. So when we say we're removing the attributes from ourselves, that's what we mean. Remove all these things that we typically identify with. And the same for God as well, because like we said a moment ago, we can call God the creator, but once we say, no, there is no creation, actually there's no duality, everything is changing in this world, so you can never say when it started, when it ended. It's simply a play of consciousness, and the base for all of that is consciousness, and that exists even when there's no creation. So that must be the essence of God as well. So in Vedic terminology, we can say that reflecting on the essence of the individual is tvam pada vichara. Tvam means you, pada means word, and vichara means contemplation. So it's contemplation on the word tvam, contemplation on the you. This is the Guru telling us, Amma telling us. Then reflecting on the essence of God is tat pada vichara. Reflecting on the word that, right? And when we reflect on the union of the two, we can call it asi pada vichara, which means contemplation on the word asi. This is coming from that great dictum from the Upanishads, tat tvam asi. So the first section is about tvam, about you, in other words, me. Each one of us can say me because the Guru is saying you. And the second section is about tat, God, the Supreme Being. That's the second section. And finally, in this third section, we have asi. Means are. Thou art that, or to put it in the order of the Gita is you that are. Right? You are that. So this is the essence of the Gita. The essence of the Gita is that one Mahavakya, that one great dictum, thou art that. And if we can master this, the idea is that we will realize the truth of thou art that. So with this background, we are now ready to begin the 13th chapter next week. And I have some questions to answer with the remaining time. I'll try to do so. Maybe pull those up. Yeah, we had some questions that I didn't answer last week, and then some came after that as well. So there was a question about God's will versus our will. And I think I tried to answer that during the course, during the class. Basically, our actions condition God's grace. And really what we call fate is only the sum total of all the factors we are unaware of. We don't know what our fate is fully. When something happens, we say, oh, it's fate. Yes, but how did that fate come into existence? If you look at it from the long span of life, it means that we created the momentum. We created that fate ourselves. We just don't remember. And Amma says it's a good thing we don't remember all of our past lives. Otherwise, we'd be depressed and angry at a lot of people who wronged us in past lives. So it's a blessing that she rebooted the memory so that we can start fresh. And we created that momentum, we just don't know it. So it's like the difference between watching somebody hit a ball, and then you know exactly which direction it's going, and then not watching them hit it, suddenly seeing the ball already flying in the air. You don't know where it's going to go, right? It's because you don't know what happened before that. So that's our problem. We don't know what the momentum was before. So we call it fate. But it's really, all of the things that happen to us in life are either our own momentum we created, or we would say, if it's good thing, it's God's grace, the Guru's grace that protected us from what should have happened. So we cannot blame the bad things on God. We can pray to God for grace, or pray to the Guru for grace to overcome our own karma. That's probably the best way to look at it. And the way we invoke that grace is by making effort on our side. A simple question is, please tell which version of the Bhagavad Gita you're using. And that is the ashram version of the Gita, Amritapuri version. You can probably get it online, hopefully, from San Ramon. I don't have it here with me right now, but you could probably find it on the Amma shop. And there's a nice one that has some commentary. If you're looking for a commentary, there's one by Swami Chidbhavananda from some decades before. It has a nice formula. It's with all the Sanskrit and everything, if you want to go deeper into that. Then there's a longer question that came, and I'm going to try to summarize it a bit to save time. It is there's a question about equanimity, and too many people, sort of pretending to have equanimity, but they're actually confused. I think this person is feeling, say, that they're actually confused, but they're not owning up to that. So, 1 minute. So, I'm just trying to. So indifference. So they're pretending to have equanimity, but what is the difference between indifference and a lack of compassion and empathy, and that looks insensitive and uncaring? And then a little more concrete question is, I think you touched on this during the class, but can you expand on the concept of equanimity related to detachment and caring? And another aspect is, how can we have no likes or dislikes while being the embodiment of love? All right. It's kind of a series of questions put together. Now, I will, if my computer will cooperate. One moment. Computer is in a bad mood. I'll just look at this a little bit to see. I had written some ideas down about that. Here we go. Excuse me. So it's true that many people are confused, I would say. They just don't know that they're confused. But we should not be concerned with other people's confusion, because we have plenty of our own. And I would say that, if we really want to grow spiritually, we should be figuring out what things we are confused about, because that's the only thing that's going to help us. So this is one of the problems that I had when I first came to Amma. When I went to a program, I was judging all the people in the hall, thinking like, why are they all wearing white? I'm normal. I'm actually even great, and these people are all weirdos. Or I don't know. I can't remember exactly what I thought at the time, but I know I was looking down on them. But really, what I should have thought was, what are my shortcomings? I was so blind to my inadequacies that I couldn't do that. It takes a long time, I feel, to really recognize our own drawbacks. Not to hate yourself, but if even if somebody talks, says that they have all these problems, there's other problems that they're not ready to own up to. So there's many blind spots in our personality. We just should focus on these things because we can't change the other people. So how is my spiritual ego expressing itself? This is another important question we can ask ourselves. The ego is very tricky. And I remember one of the Swamis told me a story that I'll never forget because it really struck me as an important point. There was this one professor who, in his college days, who would never allow people to ingratiate themselves with him or like apple polish to get better grades and everything. And so this Swami actually, he just innocently, because he really meant it, but he went to the professor one day after the class and he said, I just wanted to tell you that I've noticed you are really impervious to praise, aren't you? And he said, you noticed, huh? Gotcha, right? Being impervious to flattery was a thing he had pride in. And by recognizing that he was being flattered, but he didn't catch that, right? This is the subtle ego. One example, we all have that. So don't think about the other person's confusion. We should look at our own. So there's a big difference between being indifferent and uncompassionate, definitely. So indifferent means that you have no special agenda of your own, right? It just means that you can do something if it's necessary, but you don't have to do it either. Like that, in that sense, Amma's really indifferent. She doesn't have any like special agenda like for herself. She's here only because we need help. All of humanity needs help. That's why she's always engaged, but not because she's attached to it. She's totally detached to it. It's just compassion that comes from her spontaneously. So an uncompassionate person would be who is disinterested because he's interested in something else. Does that make sense? When you're interested in A and then B comes along, no, I'm not interested in that. I'm disinterested. That's an example of lack of compassion. But if you don't have any agenda and then you see somebody who's in trouble, you're going to help them. Because that's what human beings do. So if you don't have an abundance of desires taking up all of your mental space, then you respond as needed. You don't just do things for the sake of doing things. You don't you don't have a hyperactive mind, so there's not this prodding towards hyperactivity. Nothing to do, you don't do anything. You're indifferent. So there is a big difference. We have to understand that. It's indifference can actually come from sattva, from mental purity, because it's a lack of desires. Doesn't mean we're not compassionate. So the other thing about love and what was that thing the person said? Having no likes and dislikes, and actually having love at the same time. What is that? Okay. Finding my notes is the most difficult thing. Huh? Excuse me. Okay, I can't find it anyhow. Thing is a little bonkers right now. Let me see if I can get it back this way. Trying to get back where I was. 1 second. Now it's completely frozen. Okay. I think he's getting back in a good mood. Yeah, it's okay, baby. You're going to be just fine. Take it easy. Don't stress out. The computer was getting stressed out, I think. All right. There we go. Thank you. Good boy. Good boy. Okay, so when it comes to likes and dislikes compared with love, I would say from my experience with Amma that it's only possible to have pure love if there are no likes and dislikes. So the more likes and dislikes we have, the less space we have in our mind and ourselves and our heart for pure love. So every like and dislike that we add to our list is one more reason why we cannot love somebody or can't love unconditionally. So Amma says very clearly that love is not an emotion. I know that the person was writing that it's love is an emotion, etc. And Amma's idea, it's not an emotion, it's a flow. And she says that that flow is coming from deep within us, from the source, and that is oneness. When we feel oneness with others and anything, that's when unconditional love flows from us. So the emotional love is lower than the love that Amma is talking about. She divides them into love with a lowercase l and love with an uppercase L. So uppercase is the higher love, which is unconditional. It doesn't focus on my needs or my wants or anything. It focuses always on the other person. It has no expectations of reward or recompense. So because the lower form of love, the type of love that we always are immersed in, sadly, there's always some expectation. There's always some kind of desire. It's focused more on me. What am I getting out of this? So it can never be satisfied. Whereas the higher love that Amma's always talking about is coming from a place of satisfaction. It's coming from a place of fullness. Whereas the lower love is a pursuit of fullness, trying to get fullness through praise, through affection. That someone says something nice to us, our family member or our partner, whatever it is. It is actually not coming from within us. We're trying to get it from outside, from somebody else. And when we say I love you, a lot of the times that means I like the way you make me feel. You make me feel good. When I'm around you, I feel good. But if I don't feel good when I'm around you, then I don't think I love you anymore. What kind of love is that, right? So it's all about me, what I like, how I feel. It's not about you. That's why we call that a lower version of love. And satisfaction really comes from reducing and eliminating desires. This is where modern culture has everything backwards. I may have talked about this before, but I'll say it again. Typically now, in the modern day, we look at things as sort of a mathematical equation. Let's say I have one car, and I only want one car. So we can say 1 over 1 equals 1, right? So I'm full, I'm satisfied. But what if I have one car and I want 2 cars? That means I'm only half satisfied, right? So what if I have no car and I want a car? Then I'm not satisfied at all. So we are focused typically on increasing the numerator. Let's say we have 5 people in the house, now we need 5 cars. So we want 5 cars, we only have 2. We need to get 3 more cars so we can all be happy, right? So it's like a very straight mathematical equation, but the ancient rishis and sages, and Amma herself, understood that it's not about increasing the numerator. It's about decreasing the denominator. If you have 2 cars and you only want 1, if you can reduce that desire from 2 to 1, then you have double satisfaction, right? And ultimately, you can get that down to like 0.5. Because I only need that car half the time. I don't have to have my own car. We can share it. We can share it amongst 4 of us. So that means that there's only 1/4. So then the happiness is even greater. And if your needs and wants, the denominator becomes 0, what is 1 over 0? What is 2 over 0? What is 3 over 0? Infinity. So infinite satisfaction comes when you have no desires. You can think of it as a reverse mathematical equation from the modern day culture. And compliments, there was a question about compliments, the same person I believe. Our reaction and the way we respond to compliments has to be different on different levels. Externally, we should certainly be very kind to people who praise us. Don't say, "You're my enemy." Amma says that people who praise you are your enemy, so now you just became my enemy. No, we don't say that. We will say, we'll be kind. We may even praise them, whatever it is. We are very cordial, and all of our social decorum, we maintain that. Just like Amma does. She's very polite with all these things. But she's very tough on herself. If there's one person in the whole universe she never cuts any slack to, that's herself. So we don't have to go that far, but our internal reaction to compliments should be different. Externally, we're pleasant and kind, but internally, we should warn the mind to not get puffed up. We should remind the mind that there are a lot of shortcomings. Okay, look, she said one thing. Yeah, but how many other things do we have to work on? There's like thousands of things that we really need to polish. If we want to merge in Amma, like this, it's not going to happen. So just because one person said something, don't get all, puffed up and think like you're great. No, we're not changing anything about our spiritual, regiment. We're going to follow the same practices, and we still have a long ways to go. That kind of thing. That's better than thinking it's right around the corner, so I'm going to take a break. Right? So don't let the compliments get to us inside. That's internal. And externally, we can be polite. And when we praise other people, there should be no personal intentions or expectations along with that praise. We can even do it anonymously, so there's no way that we can get any benefit from it. Okay. We're out of time. There's one that's quick. I'll just... actually, the last 2 ones are very quick. If you go to Vaikunta, Lord Vishnu's abode, do you have to be born again? Is that the same as moksha? Well, anywhere that you have to go to can never be moksha. There's no going anywhere. Liberation is putting an end to coming and going. Samsara means living, dying, being born again, dying again. That cycle of transmigration, that's what samsara is. So if you're going to Vaikunta, no matter how long that may be, the stay may be there, you're still going to eventually come back. And people, go to the heavens because of some things they've done. They've done good deeds. They've built up a lot of punya or good karma. And so they have some joyful, pleasurable experiences after death. But if it's a product of something, that means it will eventually go away. We don't want something that's a product of something we do here. We want to know ourself. Because knowing the self is the greatest bliss and happiness that anybody can have. That's what the scriptures say. And Amma's life is the proof. So going and coming is the basic problem we have. We want to stop that, not continue it. And there was a question about a book. Maybe Lord Shiva was a being who manifested 15,000 years ago. Did Amma say anything about that? I haven't heard her say anything. Sorry, I'm not able to help you there. The last question, I think we've gone too long. There's one more question. that came towards the end, I'll address that next week, because we're over the time right now. Om Namah Shivaya. We will chant Asatoma and Loka Samasta to conclude, and then we'll have a brief meditation for those who have time to join us. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. So, close your eyes. Check your posture. Try to keep your back and neck relatively straight. Take a few long, deep breaths. Feeling your mind and body relaxing at the same time. Try to feel Amma's subtle presence all around you. Feel that you are in her embrace, even in this moment. Try to feel her within, that shining light within you. Now focus your awareness on the rhythmic flow of your breathing process. Try to merge all the thoughts into that peaceful flow with each deep inhalation and exhalation. When you focus your awareness on the breathing process in this way, the mind itself becomes more and more subtle, more capable of visualization. So try to visualize Amma's form in your heart. Imagine she is sitting in a lotus flower in the middle of your chest, the heart chakra. See her seated on a lotus flower, smiling at you with such a compassionate, loving expression. If the mind begins to wander, you can start from her beautiful countenance. Take note of her hair, her forehead, eyes, every feature of her face, and slowly go from the head all the way down to her feet. To keep the mind focused, if need be. Whenever the mind wanders, patiently bring it back to the visualization. Now in conclusion, let us mentally say a prayer to Amma first to help us in this process. We will be performing similar meditations after each class throughout this third section of the Gita. We will try to follow the progression, and we're going to need a lot of grace. So let us pray for that mentally and conclude with a prayer, with a mantra. Now we'll conclude with one prayer. Take a deep breath. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnaad Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. One more long deep breath. And as you exhale, you can slowly open your eyes. Om Namah Shivaya. Hope to see you on Saturday when we continue the discussion about Sanatana Dharma, the eternal way of life. And we'll also have some bhajans too. Namah Shivaya.